Someone wanted her story buried. Not her enemies. The people who buried it were on her side. Her name was Claudette Colvin. She was 15 years old. And what she did, 9 months before Rosa Parks, should have made her one of the most celebrated figures in American history. Instead, it nearly disappeared forever. This is the story of what really happened, why it was hidden, and the quiet, extraordinary truth that most people still don't know. Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. To understand this story, you first need to understand the world Claudette Colvin was born into. In the American South, there were laws that told black Americans where they could sit, where they could eat, where they could drink, where they could go to school. They were called Jim Crow laws, and they didn't just inconvenience people, they were designed to humiliate, to control, to remind black Americans every single day that the system did not consider them equal. On the buses of Montgomery, black passengers were required to sit at the back. If a white passenger was standing, black passengers in certain rows had to give up their seat. Not ask, not negotiate, get up or be arrested. Most people obeyed, because the alternative was dangerous, because the law was the law, because the system had been built to be inescapable. Most people obeyed. Claudette Colvin was not most people. March 2nd, 1955. Claudette is on the bus home from school. She's 15. She's been studying the United States Constitution in class. She knows what it says. She knows what it promises. The bus fills up. A white woman is standing. The driver turns around. He orders the black passengers in Claudette's row to move. The others stand. Claudette doesn't. She said later she felt something she couldn't fully explain, like the weight of every black American who had ever been silenced was physically holding her to that seat. I felt like Sojourner Truth was pushing down on one shoulder, she said, and Harriet Tubman was pushing down on the other. She didn't move. Police were called. Claudette was handcuffed, dragged off the bus, in front of everyone. She was charged with violating segregation laws, disturbing the peace, and assaulting a police officer. She was 15 years old. And here is where the story should have begun. Instead, it was about to be buried. In 1955, the civil rights movement was looking for a case. Specifically, they needed the perfect case to challenge bus segregation in court. A clean, clear, undeniable example of injustice. Something that would hold up. Something the public would rally behind. Claudette's arrest was exactly what they needed. The NAACP, the leading civil rights organization in America, took notice. Lawyers got involved. Meetings were held. And then something happened. They changed their minds. Not because Claudette hadn't been brave enough, not because what she did wasn't significant, but because they decided she was the wrong face for the campaign. Claudette was young. She was fiery. She had shouted back at the police during her arrest. She was working class. And by the time the case went to court, she was pregnant. Civil rights leaders worried. They feared that newspapers would focus on her pregnancy instead of her courage, that the message would get lost. It is important to say this carefully. The people who made this decision were not villains. They were brave people, fighting a genuinely dangerous battle, making impossible choices under impossible pressure. But the result was that Claudette Colvin's name was quietly removed from the story. She was not celebrated. She was not promoted. She was told, in effect, to step back. 9 months later, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, and the world remembers Rosa Parks. What the world doesn't know is that the legal victory that followed, that was Claudette. Here is the part that almost no one knows. Rosa Parks was arrested in December 1955. Her arrest sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, 381 days of protest, one of the most powerful acts of collective resistance in American history. But Rosa Parks's case never reached the Supreme Court. Claudette Colvin's did. In 1956, a federal lawsuit was filed, Browder versus Gale, 4 black women challenging the constitutionality of bus segregation in Montgomery. Claudette was one of them, the youngest plaintiff, 16 years old. She sat in a federal courtroom. She described what had happened on that bus, calmly, clearly, without hesitation. And in November 1956, the United States Supreme Court ruled bus segregation in Alabama was unconstitutional. The boycott ended in victory. Montgomery's buses were desegregated. A cornerstone of legal segregation had been torn down. Rosa Parks became the face of that victory. Magazines, newspapers, history books. Claudette Colvin went home. She was 17 years old. She had been arrested, prosecuted, sidelined by her own movement, and had still, in the courtroom that mattered most, helped bring down a pillar of American oppression. And nobody told the story. For decades after that courtroom, Claudette Colvin disappeared from public life. She moved to New York. She worked as a nurse's aide. She raised her son. She rarely talked about what she had done, not because she was ashamed, but because nobody asked. It wasn't until 2009, more than 50 years later, that her story began to reach a wider audience. A book, written for young people, called Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice. And then, in 2021, Claudette Colvin, aged 82, applied to have her criminal record officially cleared. Think about that. For 66 years, she was technically still a criminal for refusing to give up her seat on a bus at 15. A judge granted the request. After 66 years, the state of Alabama said she had done nothing wrong. She said she cried. So why wasn't Claudette Colvin's story told? Part of it was strategy. Part of it was fear. Part of it was a movement making hard choices in hard times. But part of it was something more uncomfortable. The history we inherit isn't just what happened, it's what someone decided to tell us. Someone decided Rosa Parks was a better story, cleaner, safer, more useful. And Claudette Colvin, a fiery, working-class, pregnant 15-year-old, was quietly set aside. But here is what that decision could not erase. She still got on the bus. She still refused to move. She still walked into a federal courtroom at 16 and told the truth. And the law still changed. You don't have to be the famous name for what you do to matter. You don't have to be celebrated in the moment for your actions to echo. Claudette Colvin is 92 years old. She is alive. And now, finally, people know her name. That was the final episode of Series 1 of the History Hunters Club. 5 children, 5 stories that history tried to simplify, or forget, or bury. If these stories moved you, share them, because stories like Claudette's only survive if people choose to tell them. Leave a comment telling us which of the 5 surprised you most. And if you want a Series 2, let us know. We have plenty more extraordinary young people to find. Until next time, keep hunting history.